They tell you aging is a matter of creaks and creams. At 76, I can still carry a 50-pound bag of soil and split a stubborn orange with a thumbnail. The harder weight is paperwork that thinks it owns you. I am Ruth Delgado of Pueblo, Colorado. I taught middle school civics for 31 years. I know the difference between order and control. One gives you room to stand. The other rearranges you like furniture. On a Tuesday, I found a yellow tag on my door, the kind that makes neighbors look away. Notice of intent to foreclose for unpaid assessments. It said in a typeface that imagines it is neutral. I ran a finger over my last name. Delgado. It's a strong name. It shouldn't look so light on paper. I called the HOA number. A man in a cheerful headset voice said, "It's automated." I asked, "Automated what?" "Compliance," he said. "Past due compliance." "How far?" I asked. He scrolled. "A sequence of fines," he said. "Trash bin visible through the side gate. A porch light bulb labeled non-conforming color temperature. A shed door unpainted for 63 days due to a rain delay." The numbers bloomed like algae. I told him I paid my monthly dues. He said the compliance line was separate and couldn't be bundled or negotiated. "A lien is algorithmic," he said, as if that explained decency. At the clinic, my refill was flagged inactive. I had been there last month. "Your insurance shows a transition," the pharmacist said, soft with the news. A billing change I had not made ricocheted like a dropped plate. My son, Daniel, had suggested centralizing the accounts so surprises don't stress you. I imagined a hand reaching into a drawer that used to be mine. I wrote these things down in a narrow notebook with a red elastic band. I titled the first page Exhibit A, HOA, Certified Letters and Door Tags. The second, Exhibit B, Insurance/Billing Switches. When the world insists on reducing you to entries, entries can be a form of prayer. On the family group thread, my granddaughter posted wedding mood boards, greenery, linen, barewood tables. I typed, "Where should I sit?" and watched the bubble breathe and vanish. Later, my daughter called to say seating would be streamlined. Streamlined is the cousin of erased. The neighbor, Mr. Quinlan, texted me a photo of my house on a real estate portal, auction feed, he wrote. "My porch, my roses, that 1-second prize, my grandmother's wind chime visible like a confession. Move-in ready in 30 days, the caption said. That's how long it takes to reassign a life if no one objects correctly. Daniel arrived with cold brew and a smile that made legal words seem like favors. "It's nothing," he said, laying a document flat on my table. "Temporary conservatorship. I'll field the calls, you rest." He tapped a signature line with a pen I didn't like. "Just housekeeping." "I taught civics," I said. "Housekeeping is not a branch of government." He laughed, not unkind. "Mom, this is me taking care of you." Care is a verb I no longer take on trust. I asked him to leave the papers. He said that would slow things. I said slowing can save a bridge from collapse. I walked to the county recorder's office that afternoon and asked for the lien book like I was ordering coffee. A clerk with jade nails found my parcel number and turned the screen toward me. The HOA had filed a lien and a notice of non-judicial sale. 2 entries were stamped with an address I've never lived at, Unit 14B in a complex downtown. My breath tightened. I asked for certified copies. I paid with a check that still carries my late husband's name. At home, I added Exhibit C, recorder entries, stamped and certified. Then I sat with a glass of water and let my hands be old, honest things on the table. There are feelings you can't metabolize with tears. Some require bulleted lists. When I called Adult Protective Services on myself, the intake worker paused. "On yourself." "I am sane," I said. "And I am being handled." She offered to send someone for a wellness check. I told her I would prefer a paper one. She laughed. I liked her immediately. Ms. Avery came on Friday in a cardigan that made bureaucracy look human. She saw my pantry, my meds in a day-of-the-week tray, the grab bar I installed after a winter ice slip. She asked if anyone had hurt me. I told her not with a hand. I showed her the notebook, the exhibits, the stamped copies. She wrote quickly, then slowly, then carefully. On her way out she said, "Call if anyone pressures you to sign." "I'll call if they ask me to breathe their way," I said. She smiled with her whole face. You're funny. People call you funny when you refuse to be frightened alone. Exhibit D became APS intake and home visit notes. I made coffee and sipped it like a strategy. The tag on the door was still there, trembling in the breeze. I left it. Sometimes the only way to stop being haunted is to make the ghost testify. A hospital notice arrived. Charity care application denied. Incomplete. I had never applied. The denial had a barcode and a phone number that played a flute loop while you waited. It's all centralized now, the representative said. Your son handles authorizations. She sounded relieved to have a name when so many calls arrive without one. My son does not handle my voice, I said. I hung up and locked the door to think. That night, I dreamed of classrooms, names read aloud, hands raised, the quiet human joy of being counted. In the morning, I put on my church jacket and walked to the legal aid clinic 3 blocks away. The receptionist took one look at Exhibit A through D and buzzed me in like I had stated a password. We can file for a temporary restraining order on the sale, the attorney said. We'll argue defective notice and conflicts on the board. Also, do not sign anything naming a family member as guardian unless there's clear and convincing evidence you cannot manage. The court must choose the least restrictive alternative first. The words fit my bones like a cardigan of their own. I added them to the margin. Least restrictive first. Clear and convincing. I left with a packet and a calm that tasted like crisp air. On Sunday, I ironed my linen napkins and waited for the doorbell. If family is going to be uncomfortable, let it be for reasons that stand up in court. The thing about auctions is that someone always believes they are getting a bargain. The harm is distributed so finely, notice here, fee there, click to accept, that by the time the gavel falls, the distance between paperwork and person feels polite. The HOA board met on Mondays in a room that smelled like dry erase markers and earnestness. I arrived early and sat where the fan was kind. The agenda item, compliance pipeline, aging accounts, came right after pool umbrella replacement. People flipped pages. A man with a spreadsheet explained that automated letters improve velocity. Velocity, he said proudly, leads to timely resolution. I am a resolution, I said softly. Not a velocity. They looked over, surprised that one of the accounts could move and speak. I took out my exhibits and set them in a line like a small parade. You filed lien notices to an address I don't live at, I said. You logged a trash bin violation on a day it hailed sideways. The porch bulb's color temperature, I paused, is the sun. A board member cleared her throat. Then the president reminded the room that comments must be confined to 2 minutes. I smiled. It'll take longer to fix. After the meeting, a woman in a chambray shirt whispered that her mother got the same yellow tag. I paid it, she said, eyes down. Cheaper than fighting. Cheaper is another cousin of erased. At the recorder's office, I requested the trustee's deed form in advance, just to know what shape the harm would take. A clerk slid it across with the casual sadness of someone handing out rain facts. I took it home and labeled a fresh page Exhibit E, trustee's deed template, blank. Seeing the empty lines made me stubborn. When the TRO hearing came, the courtroom lights hummed like bees. The HOA's counsel wore a suit the color of agreements. He argued that all procedures were followed. He cited software names like Saints. Our legal aid attorney countered, pointing to stamped addresses, the mismailed notices, the board member's brother who ran the collections vendor. The judge looked at me. Ms. Delgado, she said, how are you doing at home? I have keys, a calendar, a working stove, I said. I take my pills with breakfast and a poem. APS came and found no hazards. I can show you the grab bar. The courtroom smiled before it could stop itself. The judge issued a short order pausing the sale pending a full hearing. Irreparable harm is not academic where a home is concerned, she said. I wrote the phrase down because precision is a kind of shelter. Daniel came by that evening with flowers wrapped in crinkly cellophane that sounded like arguments. Why are you making this a scene? He asked. Scenes are what you stage, I said. This is a record. He sighed. Mom, you're letting strangers scare you. Strangers scare me less than sons who want my signature without my questions, I said, and hated how true it felt. He paced, then said the line I would come to know by heart. If you just trusted me, none of this would be necessary. Trust is a bridge you don't cross in the dark. In the weeks that followed, the wedding came with a chair that had my name folded backward. I unfolded it and placed it forward, center-left, where someone would trip on their story if they tried to walk past me. When the toast referenced optimizing elder care, I put my glass down and made a list under the table. Exhibit F, witness statements re. Pressure to sign/consolidate. The hospital's centralized billing assigned me a charity denial with a code I had not asked for. I requested the audit log and got back entries showing access by a representative account tagged with Daniel's email. It's meant to help, the billing manager said, teary with the strain of apologizing for systems. I added Exhibit G, hospital access logs and denial. Legal aid found a pro bono forensic accountant who reviewed the HOA pipeline. He traced fees flowing to a collections vendor that shared a P.O. box with the board treasurer's consultancy. He printed a thin report that felt like a thunderhead and titled it Conflict Analysis. We slipped it into a plastic sleeve as if it were a diploma. Exhibit H. The last exhibit felt like a dare. I walked into a local bank and changed a small, but symbolic thing. I named a neutral independent executor for my estate, not a relative who could be confused about where help ends and harvest begins. The notary's embosser felt like a seal on my lungs. Exhibit I, fiduciary/executor appointment, neutral. By then the neighborhood had started to murmur. 2 more yellow tags appeared across the street. One neighbor paid, one cried, one hid. I baked banana bread and took it over. Stewardship is cheaper than foreclosure if you start early. The second hearing moved faster than I expected. Harm likes to sprint when you startle it. The HOA council arrived with a new binder and an old tone. Daniel filed a petition for guardianship the same week for safety. He wrote in the box where motives go to pretend. We would argue both in one morning like turning 2 keyholes with one wrist. Before bed, I walked my lot line with a flashlight, not to find anything, but to remind the night that I would not be misplaced. Courtrooms smell like the varnish of other people's endings. I wore the jacket that makes me look like a person who could grade a nation's homework. The judge asked for us to proceed on the sale first. Our attorney called the recorder's clerk, who confirmed the misaddressed notices. She entered the stamped copies into the record like careful stones on a path. The forensic accountant testified to the board/vendor entanglement. The HOA president said the word vendor so many times it seemed to replace neighbor. The judge turned to me. Ms. Delgado, she said, what do you need? I need a fair chance to be as careful with my life as you would be with yours, I said. I need systems that can tell the difference between velocity and violence. She nodded like a human being in a robe. On this record, she said, I find defective notice and conflicts that undermine the integrity of the sale process. The attempted foreclosure is void. The word void is a bell ringing a hurt into the past tense. Then came Daniel's petition. His lawyer used my exhibits as proof of my preoccupations. He described my notebook as voluminous. He said the word fragile as if it could be a fact. Our attorney stood and spoke like wind across a field. No clear and convincing evidence of incapacity has been presented. APS logs reflect no safety concerns. The least restrictive alternative exists and functions. A neutral executor for future estate administration, banking and medical audits, written boundaries, community support. MS. Avery from APS testified gently. Ms. Delgado called us on herself, she said. That alone tells you most of what you need to know. About what? The judge asked. About stewardship, Ms. Avery said. The judge denied the petition. She said it clean, like carpenters finish the last cut. She adopted our boundaries as a protocol attached to the order. No surprise signings, no consolidation without written counsel, visits scheduled, keys inventoried, communications primarily in writing. She invited APS to close if they saw fit. She encouraged the HOA to commission an independent audit and to notify all owners of their appeal rights in language larger than the fees. Order entered, we stepped into daylight that felt like the first honest breath after a hard swim. Outside, the HOA president looked at me and said, not unkindly, You could have just come to a coffee. I brought banana bread, I said. Daniel stood on the courthouse steps like a boy at a bus stop who missed the ride he wanted. I was trying to help, he said. Then help like a witness, I said. Not like a locksmith. He nodded once, twice, then left with his jaw set in an expression I used to see when he lost at checkers. Later, he texted a photo of a locksmith receipt with a note. Returned your extra key. Sorry. It was the first apology he had offered without a preface. I printed it and placed it at the back of the folder, not an exhibit, just proof that some hearts file late. APS mailed a closure letter with the bureaucratic blessing I had learned to love, no services needed at this time. I slid it into the notebook and wrote in the margin, not a victory, a language. What language? The one that says love should be legible without being total. That safety is not a synonym for custody. That convenience, without consent, is a pretty word for harm. That a neighborhood is a higher technology than an algorithm if you maintain it. On Sunday, I set out 3 mugs and a list: gutters, the far fence, the shed hinge. The neighbor with the chambray shirt came by with her mother. We ate banana bread and made a plan. Daniel arrived later with a new tone of voice, the one adult children use when they remember they were raised by someone who taught them where dignity belongs. Where do I sit? He asked, hand on the chair's back instead of pulling it. Center left, I said, smiling. Where someone will trip on their story if they try to walk past you. When everyone left, I washed the mugs and printed the order. I taped a small copy inside the hall closet where I keep the warranty receipts and the funeral pamphlet from my husband's service. The paper didn't make me invincible. It made me legible, to courts, to boards, to the son I love with new boundaries. The notebook is thinner now because it holds what matters, not just dates and stamps, but a mirror. In it I see a country that has trained its hands to scroll while roofs leak, and taught its teens to optimize while grandparents carry couches quietly down narrow stairs. I see how harm gets rebranded as pipeline and how privacy is bartered for an efficiency we never voted on. I see how easy it is to confuse being needed with being owned. The question I leave taped inside my closet is the one that woke me up. Who profits when care is centralized and neighbors are optional? I don't plan to answer it alone. I plant tomatoes along the fence and share starters with anyone who wants to grow red proofs of belonging. I attend the board meetings with banana bread and 2 minutes of remarks. I teach a free Saturday class at the library called Paperwork for people who've had enough. Kids help their grandparents print forms. Grandparents show kids how to rehang a door. Somewhere in there is a bridge that doesn't collapse when someone tries to carry the whole family's weight across it. Order, simplified, enter today. The court sets aside the HOA foreclosure process as void for defective notice and conflicts of interest. Petition for guardianship/conservatorship is denied for lack of clear and convincing evidence. Least restrictive alternative confirmed. Neutral independent executor designation acknowledged. APS may close its inquiry. No services required. I place a copy in the notebook and a copy by the coffee maker where gratitude lives. That's stewardship, making sure the future can find what the present learned. And if a yellow tag ever flutters on my door again, I will let it tremble in the wind just long enough to steady my hand, then write the first line of a new exhibit, not because I am afraid, but because I have learned how to wake myself with paper. They say auctions run on speed. But speed is only the costume convenience wears when it wants to pass for care. By the time the gavel falls, the harm has been sifted into polite portions, a notice here, a fee there, a checkbox nobody meant to check, and everybody shrugs, grateful to be a professional. The HOA board met Mondays in a room that smelled like dry erase markers and idealism. I arrived early and sat where the fan was kind. On the agenda, right after pool umbrella replacement, was compliance pipeline aging accounts. A man in a golf shirt presented charts. Automation increased velocity, he said proudly. Velocity yields timely resolution. The board nodded as if speed were immoral. I am a resolution, I said softly. Not a velocity. Heads turned, surprised the spreadsheet could speak. I lifted my binder and lined up the tabs like a parade. You filed lien notices to an address I do not live at, I said. You logged a trash bin violation on a day it hailed sideways. The porch bulb's non-conforming color temperature, I paused, is the sun. The president cleared her throat. The secretary reminded me public comments are limited to 2 minutes. It'll take longer to fix, I said, smiling the way teachers smile when they've planned the next 10 moves. After the meeting, a woman in a chambray shirt whispered that her mother had received the same yellow tag. I paid it, she said, eyes down. Cheaper than fighting. Cheaper is another cousin of erased. Cheaper moves faster because it doesn't count what it costs. At the recorder's counter, I asked for the trustee's deed template in advance. The clerk slid it across with the small sadness of someone distributing rain facts. I carried it home and labeled a fresh page, Exhibit I, Trustee's Deed Template, blank. Seeing the empty lines hardened my resolve. A blank is an invitation. It can invite a signature or a refusal. The TRO hearing hummed like bees. The HOA's counsel wore a suit the color of agreements. He recited software names like saints. Our legal aid attorney, Ms. Cheever, argued defective notice, the misaddressed Unit 14V, and conflicts. We had a suspicion about the collections vendor. The judge asked me, Ms. Delgado, how are you functioning at home? I have keys, a calendar, and a working stove, I said. I take my pills with breakfast and a poem. APS found no hazards. I can show you the grab bar. The courtroom smiled before it could stop itself. The judge issued a short order staying the sale pending a full hearing. Irreparable harm is not academic where a home is concerned, she said. I wrote the phrase down because precision is a kind of shelter. That night, Daniel came with flowers wrapped in cellophane that sounded like arguments. You're letting strangers scare you. Strangers scare me less than sons who want my signature without my questions, I said, and I hated the taste of it even as I knew it true. He paced, then delivered the sentence I would learn by heart. If you just trusted me, none of this would be necessary. Trust is a bridge you don't cross in the dark. The next morning, I brewed coffee strong enough to write history and began homework. I searched public filings for the collections vendor, Cypress Recovery Partners, LLC. Their mailing address matched a P.O. box used by the HOA Treasurer's Consulting Company. I printed screenshots and stapled them, then drew lines in pencil the way a civics teacher does when mapping powers and limits. I looked up their business registry, the registered agent, a change of address filed 2 Aprils ago. The web left fingerprints. It always does. At the library, a volunteer named Kenneth showed me the terminal with access to archived board minutes. In a meeting 6 months back, the board had voted to pilot third-party collections to improve velocity, and the treasurer had recused himself after a comment about industry expertise. The minutes did not record who seconded the motion. The recording link was unavailable. I walked to the county procurement office to ask what public oversight exists when a volunteer board outsources force. A clerk with a silver bob said HOAs aren't public agencies, but consumer protection still applies, deceptive practices, conflicts, unfair leverage. She suggested filing with the state's consumer division and asked me to include my exhibits. I watched her write elder consumer in the memo line. The words looked like armor. Meanwhile, my hospital audit request came back with access logs. A representative account had viewed my file 5 times and switched my authorization to mail order. The account was tagged with Daniel's email alias. The billing manager called apologetic, threading the needle between HIPAA and common sense. Families set up proxy access all the time, she said. Sometimes they forget to tell, the family. If someone touches my voice, I said lightly, they should use gloves we can all see. I added the logs to Exhibit F and wrote a note in the margin. Transparency is consent with a wristband. 2 kitchen scenes altered our orbit. Kitchen I, the stack. Daniel laid a neat stack of papers on the table, POA, HIPAA authorization, conservatorship petition draft, and a pen. Let's centralize, he said. Less stress. He slid a page toward me the way a waiter slides a check between dessert and regret. I slid it back. We're moving to written channels, I said. If you have a request, email it. We can use counsel to review. Mom, date, time, sender, subject. I tapped the notebook. These are the ways we honor each other when love is confused. Kitchen 2, the threat that wants to be a gift. 2 days later, the stack returned with a new tone. I can't keep you safe if you don't cooperate, Daniel said. You're making me the bad guy. The phrase hung in the room like steam off a boil. You can keep me safe by not taking my choices, I said. I am asking you to be my witness, not my warden. It got quiet enough to hear the refrigerator's small acts of faith. I returned to legal aid with a heavier binder. MS. Cheever introduced me to Mr. Powell, a forensic accountant who volunteers once a month. He lifted his glasses in a way that made me think of high school shop teachers right before a useful truth. He traced fees flat, then escalator, flowing to Cypress Recovery Partners and back to a consultancy whose principal shared a last name with our treasurer. He assembled a thin report titled Conflict Analysis, Pre-Hearing. It felt like a thunderhead you could put in a folder. I baked banana bread and took a loaf to Mrs. Hargrove across the street, second yellow tag this month. She cried into a towel and asked if she should just pay. Cheaper than fighting, she whispered. I said a cost that erases you is not a bargain. We sat at her table and wrote 2 certified letters together. On Thursday, I marched myself to Ridgeway Bank and made a small, symbolic change that steadied my lungs. I named a neutral independent executor for my estate. When the notary embossed the page, something in my chest clicked back into a gentler gear. I slid the copy into the binder. Exhibit J, fiduciary/executor appointment, neutral. Letters aren't strength, but they're leverage you can lift with. The wedding arrived a week later. I wore my navy dress and the brooch my husband bought me when our daughter was born. The chair chart taped to a foam board did not include my name. A planner in an earpiece asked who I was. The grandmother, I answered. She found me a chair near a pillar. I turned it gently toward the center and placed my clutch on the seat like a flag. During the toast, a cousin praised optimizing elder care. I felt knives coming in velvet. I put the glass down and made a list beneath the table linen. Exhibit K, witness statements re. Pressure to sign/consolidate. The K made me laugh. My binder was crawling alphabetically toward an order that would not be polite. All this time I was teaching again. The librarian, a woman with a haircut that could pass for authority, asked if I would share what I'd learned. At the community room, we set up a class called Paperwork for People Who've Had Enough. We met Saturdays at 10. I built a syllabus. Week 1, certified mail and the green card ritual. How to write dispute letters that pass any inbox prejudice. How to copy the clerk. How to store the green cards so you don't lose a month to a drawer. Week 2, identity theft and credit freezes. How to file the FTC report. How to freeze your credit with all 3 bureaus. How to sit with the feeling of being accused of being yourself. Week 3, medical access and proxies. What HIPAA proxy forms mean, the difference between help and harvest, how to request audit logs without sounding like you want to fight. Week 4, county recorder, reading the lien book without losing your lunch, asking for stamped copies, understanding trustees' deed templates, the art of being courteous and unmistakable. Week 5, choosing a neutral fiduciary, the difference between a saint and a system, how to ask a bank to hold your papers without holding your breath. Week 6, household protocols, keys, visitors, repairs, text-only comms, making a home legible without turning it into a small county. We practiced saying no like a form letter and yes like a boundary. People brought donuts. Someone brought a story about a cable company appointment that turned into a sales ambush. We wrote a mini protocol for 90-minute windows and names on clipboards. I watched a retired machinist teach a nurse how to hang a door, and the nurse taught him how to set up 2-factor. The room became a small technology that outperformed 1,000 dashboards. A week before the full hearing, we received a subpoena for board communications relating to my address and the collections vendor. Emails arrived with redactions thick as frosting. Enough leaked through to show a familiarity that made recusal look like theater. Mr. Powell added the exhibit to his report. Ms. Cheever tucked it behind the TRO order and whispered, "This is how we build bridges that hold weight." The day before court, Daniel came by with a locksmith. I stood in the doorway until the man read my posture and tipped his cap. "Call me if you need anything, ma'am." Daniel looked like a boy who had lost the game he wanted to be allowed to change the rules of. "I was trying to help," he said. Help like a witness, Daniel, I said quietly. Show up. Bring coffee. Take notes. Be calendar. Don't be key. That night, I walked my lot line with a flashlight, not to find anything, but to remind the night I would not be misplaced. A neighbor called out from his porch, "You good, Miss D?" "I'm accounted for," I said, and meant it. Courtrooms carry the varnish of other people's endings. I wore the jacket that makes me look like someone who can grade a nation's homework and drink the coffee anyway. Miss Cheever placed the binder in front of me as if it could study the building. "Let's proceed on the foreclosure first," the judge said, voice like a level on a carpenter's belt. Our side called the recorder's clerk, who confirmed the misaddressed notice to Unit 14B and placed stamped copies into the record, like careful stones across a stream. Mr. Powell explained the vendor entanglement. Fees escalated past dues into profit, collected by a third party that shared a P.O. box with the treasurer's side company. The minutes recorded a recusal that did not isolate the influence. The HOA president said the word vendor so many times it replaced neighbor. The judge asked me what I needed. "A fair chance to be as careful with my life as you are with yours," I said. "Systems that can tell the difference between velocity and violence." She nodded like a human being in a robe. "On this record, I find defective notice and conflicts that undermine the integrity of the sale process. The attempted foreclosure is void." Void is a bell that rings a hurt into the past tense. Then came Daniel's petition. His lawyer used my exhibits to prove my preoccupations, a word that tries to make care sound pathological. He described my notebook as voluminous. He said fragile as if he were naming a species. Our attorney stood, wind across a field. "No clear and convincing evidence of incapacity has been presented. APS logs reflect no safety concerns. The least restrictive alternative functions, a neutral independent executor, freezes, logs, household protocol, community support. Help is available without custody." Ms. Avery from APS testified gently. "Ms. Delgado called us on herself," she said. "That tells you most of what you need to know about stewardship." The judge denied the petition the way good carpenters finish the last cut clean, no splinters. She adopted our household boundaries protocol as an attachment to the order, no surprise signings, no consolidation without counsel, text-first communications, key inventory, visitors scheduled. She invited APS to close its inquiry consistent with these findings. She encouraged the HOA to commission an independent audit and notify all owners of their appeal rights in language larger than the fees. Order entered, we stepped into daylight that felt like the first honest breath after a hard swim. The HOA president approached, tired, not cruel. "You could have just come to coffee," she said. "I brought banana bread," I answered. On the courthouse steps, Daniel stood like a boy at a bus stop who missed the ride he wanted and blamed the timetable. I was trying to help. "Then help like a witness," I repeated. "Not like a locksmith." He nodded once, twice. That night he texted a photo of a locksmith receipt with a line, "Returned your extra key." Sorry. No preface, no flourish, only the small, precise apology of a man learning the grammar of boundaries. I printed it and tucked it in the back of the binder. Not an exhibit. Proof that some hearts violate. APS mailed a closure letter with my favorite bureaucratic blessing, "No services needed at this time." I slid it behind Exhibit D and wrote in the margin, "Not a victory, a language." What language? The kind that says love should be legible without being total. The kind that says safety is not a synonym for custody. That convenience, without consent, is a polite word for harm. That a neighborhood is a higher technology than an algorithm if you maintain it. On Sunday, I set out 3 mugs and a list: gutters, far fence, shed hinge. Mrs. Hargrove came with her daughter. Mr. Quinlan brought his dog and his late bins. We wrote a mutual aid schedule on a whiteboard that has seen too many birthday menus. Tuesday, gutters with Ron. Thursday, call the clerk with Alma. Saturday, class at the library. Week 3, HIPAA proxies and audit logs. People who had stopped waving started lingering on sidewalks again, comparing green cards like birdwatchers. The yellow tags slowed the way storms do when a town learns to read the sky. At the library, our class doubled. I brought templates, dispute letters, logs for calls, a one-page household protocol sheet with checkboxes for keys and visitor hours. We practiced saying, "I dispute," without apology, and "I request written confirmation," without anger. I taught them the posture of a counter, not an opponent. In the corner, a teen helped three grandmothers set up two-factor. In exchange, they taught him to reseat a door so it would stop catching at the bottom. The room smelled like coffee and a small future. Daniel started coming by on Wednesdays with a list. The first week, he asked, "Where do I sit?" "Hand on the chair back, not pulling." "Center left," I said, smiling. "Where someone will trip over your story if they try to walk past you." He read the protocol, touched the box for comms by text, nodded at the key inventory, didn't flinch. He brought coffee hot enough to forgive a week. He took the recycling out without telling it a story about heroism. Twice he corrected himself mid-sentence, swapping protect for support, like a man learning to lift with his knees. I printed the order and taped a small copy inside the hall closet next to the warranty receipts and the funeral program. The paper didn't make me invincible. It made me legible, to courts, to boards, to the son I love with new grammar. I placed another copy by the coffee maker, where gratitude lives and guests can read between sips. When the HOA sent a letter about their independent audit, they included a paragraph in bold. "Owners, if you receive a notice of non-judicial sale, you have rights, including the right to dispute and to cure. Contact information enclosed." The font was large enough to be felt. At the next meeting, Velocity shared the table with stewardship. It looked awkward at first, like two cousins from different sides of the country, then more natural as the room learned to use both hands. Sometimes I still wake to the shape of the yellow tag in my mind, the way you wake to rain on a metal roof. When I hear a rustle at the door, I let it whisper long enough to steady my hand. Then I write the first line of a new exhibit: date, time, what was said, what was done, not because I am afraid, but because I have learned how to wake myself with paper. If there's a global problem stitched to my private pain, it's this: we've trained our eyes to scan for efficiencies and let our hands forget the weight of stewardship. We optimize until we can't recall what the thing was for. Thresholds like clear and convincing aren't walls to keep elders out, they're gates to keep casual power from walking in. Least restrictive isn't leniency. It's a promise that freedom isn't surrendered for someone else's calendar. In class, I keep a final slide titled, "What to Tape Inside the Closet." It lists 5 items: a copy of your order, if you have one, your household protocol, keys, visitors, repairs, comms, the APS letter, no services needed if it's true today, your neutral fiduciary contact card, a single line in your own hand: "I am a person before I am a process." Last week, a woman named Pearl read the line aloud and cried the way people cry when a truth finally shows them where to sit. We handed her a tissue and a pen. She wrote Exhibit A at the top of a clean page and began. I still plant tomatoes along the fence. I share starters with anyone who wants to grow red proofs of belonging. We count stems and green cards and neighbors who wave. We don't measure velocity anymore. We measure how often someone shows up with coffee and asks where to sit. And when I pass the hall closet, I touch the order gently, the way you touch a child's forehead to be sure a fever has broken, and I say to the thin air of my home the sentence that kept me upright through the shuffling of papers and the quiet storm of family: "Help me like a witness, not like a locksmith." The house answers with the plain, durable language of good lumber and ink drying. It says present, the way kids said it in my classroom when they learned their names carried weight. The court sets aside the HOA foreclosure process on 812 Cypress Bend as void for defective notice and conflicts of interest. Petition for guardianship/conservatorship is denied. No clear and convincing evidence of incapacity. Least restrictive alternative confirmed. Neutral independent executor designation acknowledged for estate administration. APS may close its inquiry. No services required.